Hi guys, Jen here with Zen Jen Holistic, and today our topic of discussion is setting boundaries. So what you can expect from today's live is to go over what is boundaries and the different types of boundaries. I'm going to actually give you a real life example of how a boundary can be set in your life, and then I'm going to give you some tips to help you set and enforce boundaries in your own life. So first and foremost, what are boundaries? Now, boundaries are the barriers that we put up, whether it be physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or even sexually. So boundaries are kind of like when you think of like a fence, that's a boundary of your actual property. So that's just a way that you could kind of think of boundaries as like little fences around either your mental health or your emotional health. Now, boundaries help us define what is accepted and unacceptable in our lives, in the way that others can treat us, whether it be, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatnot. So with that being said, I want to go over the different types of boundaries. Now, there are a handful of different types of boundaries, such as physical boundaries. So, for example, maybe not wanting to be hugged and you prefer like either a handshake or even just like a simple nod. An emotional boundary. So not allowing someone to make you feel guilty for their own mistakes. So that is a prime example of something that could happen in a narcissistic relationship where somebody will try to make you feel bad for something that they did. So by not allowing someone to make you feel guilty from what they're, like spewing off saying, oh, you did this and you made me feel this way, you put up that boundary and saying, I'm not going to feel guilty for that. A mental boundary. So being respectful of differences and opinions in a discussion without feeling the need to convince others that you have to be right. So just being very open-minded to different types of conversations and different types of like communication that you're having with someone. So that is a good mental boundary. But then also not allowing their personal beliefs to affect your personal beliefs. You're able to have your own different beliefs, but still respect each other. A time boundary. This is such a big one that people don't really think about. So a time boundary is setting limits on different types of hours. So like whether it be your work hours, your physical hours, so that way you can ensure that you allow yourself to have proper personal time. Material boundaries. An example, maybe you don't want to let somebody borrow your car because you're uncomfortable with that. That's a type of physical boundary. I don't want you to, borrow my physical belongings because it makes me feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. Another one is digital boundaries. This is another big one that we don't really think of when it comes to boundaries. So that could be not responding to work emails or text messages after office hours. So I want to go over an example, a real life example that has happened recently in my life where I have enforced specific types of boundaries. Now, I will tell you, I have not always been the best at enforcing boundaries. Especially growing up being a, people pleaser and dealing with abandonment, I didn't set the strongest boundaries, especially for my mental and emotional health. It only took me to like getting on my healing journey for me to realize like, oh, I should have enforced these types of boundaries for more like self-compassion and self-respect. So a real life example is, you may not know this about me, is that I actually have two businesses. I am a marketer and I've been doing marketing for over 14 years. I have a degree in design and a degree in merchandising. So I've been doing merchandising, in-store advertising, print advertising, digital marketing, and a lot of that fun creative stuff, but a lot of that other type of stuff too, like strategies and different types of things. Now I do that and I still currently do that, but also you may know me as a Reiki practitioner and a healer. Now, those are two completely different worlds. So marketing is more of that masculine energy. However, the design aspect of it is that feminine and creative energy, while healing and teaching and promoting wellness, that is very feminine energy. Now, again, two very completely different things. And in order in our life for it to like flow smoothly is that we try to maintain a good balance. And I know that there's going to be ebbs and flows throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year, whatever, maybe. But if you place the proper boundaries on your time and on your digital and everything else, then you can ensure a smooth flow. Now, I had gotten to the point where I was getting very, very busy with juggling both businesses. And it was becoming a little hard for me because by the end of the week, I was so exhausted. I remember a few weeks ago, I spent the whole weekend in bed because I was so exhausted from the week. And it was successful and productive week, but I was exhausted. That's when I realized I was like, okay, not only do I need to create a better time boundary, but I also need to create a better digital boundary too. So what I did was I created a better schedule, a more structured schedule of which days I'm going to be focusing on marketing solely and which days I'm going to be focusing on Reiki and healing and teaching solely. Now, that, helped me create those boundaries. But what I also needed to do was to create time boundaries as well within that. So I found myself like answering emails or checking messages sometimes later into the evening. And I realized I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so burnt out. I'm exhausted. I'm working over 40 hours. Like I need to reevaluate and restructure. So now I've decided that I'm only going to be checking emails and messages through a certain, time period instead of allowing myself to just check them whenever. So that really helped me in the weeks going forward, leading up till now, where I feel so rejuvenated, so like excited and full of even more creative energy and more creative projects, especially if you've noticed, I have a lot going on behind the scenes. So I have a lot going on. So it has been able to, me creating the time boundaries and the digital boundaries have allowed me to be able to manage everything and manage it effectively, where I'm not working over 40 hours, where I'm working, closer to 30. And that has allowed me to feel way more like rejuvenated. And that's really, really important. Now, I want to go over some different types of tips for setting boundaries that may be helpful in setting boundaries in your life. So number one is to bring awareness to where you may need to set boundaries in your life. Maybe it's, setting that physical boundary in your relationships. Maybe it's setting emotional or mental boundaries with friends and family. Maybe it's setting a time and digital boundary with work or your business. So establish where you need to do those types of boundaries first. Now, understanding what your personal needs are day to day and what your limits and what you can do and can't do is going to be very helpful in understanding and identifying where you may need to place those boundaries. Now, I invite you whenever you watch this video to take a few days and to meditate on where you may need to set those types of boundaries. On my Instagram community, if you are following me and you happen to check your Instagram on Monday, I'm going to be dropping some journal prompts to help and going forward and setting this specific boundary. Now, after you've established where you need to set the boundary, is to be direct. Communicate your boundaries clearly and use I statements. So for example, I need some time alone after work. This is a great way to put it on you, like saying, hey, this is what I need, and not being a blamer or putting it on someone else. So if somebody's like, hey, you want to go grab a drink after work? You could be like, you know what? No, thank you. I'm actually going to spend some time alone to recharge my energy. And that's that. But also keep in mind that no is a complete sentence too. That is enforcing a boundary and making sure you stick to it. So another tip is to be consistent. Now, you have heard me say this over and over and over again. Consistency is key in regardless of whatever you're doing, whether you're trying to implement a new habit. So specifically for setting boundaries, this is huge, because if you are showing and enforcing inconsistent with your boundary, then people are not going to, run over it. So stick to your boundaries, even though it's difficult, especially when you're starting out and setting boundaries. It may be a little difficult because maybe somebody needs your help, like, hey, can you help me move after, work today? And you may be really exhausted or burnt out, or maybe you just want to spend some time alone, like, hey, I can't today. However, I can help you X, Y, and Z day. That's enforcing your boundary, but still being able to be available for someone. Another tip is to be assertive with your communication. Be assertive, but not aggressive. That's another thing, is when you come off as aggressive, people may be like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I didn't realize you were feeling that way. Like, it's kind of, it may take them by surprise. If you're just assertive, like, no, thank you, I'm going to spend some time recharging my own energy, that's completely fine. Stand up for yourself, but also respect others. That's a major point, is to make sure you're respecting them too. Another type of tip that you can do is to expect some resistance. So some people may test your boundaries, especially if you haven't enforced them before. This is where consistency is going to come into play. Make sure that you're being consistent. So if somebody's continuously asking you, like, hey, let's go get a drink, or let's go do this, let's go do that, maybe it doesn't align with your values, and that's okay. You can tell them no. Just make sure you're being consistent when you tell them no. Also is stay firm and do not feel pressured, because there are times that people are going to want to pressure you. Maybe you're not a heavy drinker and people keep asking you, like, I want to go drink, let's do this. I'm not a big drinker. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to pass. Again, saying no is more than enough as well. Also, having respect for your own boundaries and other people's boundaries. One thing you may not realize is you do need to treat people the way that you want to be treated. So one of my biggest things that I always do is if I need to vent to a friend, I always ask them if I can vent first. Like, I text them, I'm like, hey, can I vent real quick? Or hey, can I vent for like a few minutes or something? And they'll either be like, yeah, go for it. Or like, hey, I'm in the middle of something, like, can we talk later? Either way is fine. You have to respect their wishes, because you do not want to dump on and vent to somebody, especially if they may be going through their own things. Maybe they have their own stuff going on that you may or may not be aware of, that they're trying to deal with, and you dumping an extra drama and other stuff onto their life may just be like the catapult, where it's just like, okay, I cannot deal with anything else now. So always be respectful of not only of your own boundaries, but other people's boundaries as well. Another tip is to make sure you're consistently practicing self-care and prioritizing your own well-being. Remember, you are number one. So regular self-care will strengthen your boundaries, and it'll allow you to realize that, like, hey, my time is important. So again, if somebody's asking you, to do something and you're just like, you know what, I really need time alone, you could just say either no, thank you, or I really need some time to just focus on myself. Either way. The last little tidbit and tip that I have is, if you're struggling to enforce strong, consistent boundaries, I can actually help you with that. I am a certified Reiki practitioner, but I'm also a self-love coach. There are so many different components of self-love coming from all of like self-compassion and self-care, but it's also setting and enforcing those boundaries. It's also having confidence to enforce those boundaries. It's also being able to stand up for yourself, even when you feel a little scared and it may be challenging. So if you do need help enforcing and setting those boundaries, I can help you. And now may be the perfect time for you to truly step into your power. So if you want to dive in deeper and get deeper into setting those boundaries and enforcing those boundaries, please feel free to either leave me a comment, or you can DM me, and I will get you all the information and let you know how that can look and how we can get you to enforcing those boundaries. Now, the end a little bit is, I want you to know that setting and maintaining boundaries is a continuous process. So not only keeping up with the consistency, I want you to know that it's okay to make adjustments to your boundaries, especially on if things change in your life. So you may learn from experiences, and you may go and grow and realize that certain boundaries are maybe, not working for you, or maybe you want to enforce more boundaries around certain things. I want you to be able to regularly evaluate where you need to set those boundaries. Make adjustments when you need them based on your current circumstances and your current needs. It's okay to change your boundaries, but just make sure that you keep up with consistency, because that will help you to enforce the boundaries. Now, again, bringing awareness to what your boundary, where you need to set boundaries in your life, is going to be the first step before we can start enforcing the boundaries. So keep in mind to sit and meditate and really think about where you do need to set boundaries. Maybe you are excellent with time management. Maybe you're like, you know what, once at the end of the day, I put my phone down and that's that, and I'm really good, and I don't really need boundaries around that. But when it comes to, physical or mentally emotional, like I feel like oftentimes where people are asking me questions about my life that I'm not ready to share, I feel like pressured to share. And just knowing that it's okay, you don't need to share or overshare or, talk about something you're not ready to talk about. That is setting strong and firm boundaries. So again, if you need help, if you've implemented, where you need to set the boundaries and you started doing some of these tips and you still need a little encouragement or a little more confidence to set these strong boundaries, please feel free to reach out to me. I am here to help you. I want you to be strong and confident in moving forward and setting those boundaries wherever you may feel you need them. So thank you so much for joining me today on setting boundaries. If you have any questions about this topic or want to learn more, please, again, leave a comment or DM me and I would be happy to get you more information. I will see you next month on next month's live. Thank you guys. Bye.